We have Jess Hilarious in the hot seat. She basically said anyone with a uterus can have a baby, even if they don't identify as a woman.
She draws strength from the fact that she both has a uterus and presents as a female. And she's saying that makes her a woman.
The womb is a superpower. Because the irony for me in all this is that people who want tolerance seem to not want to give it.
I'm tired of being considered transphobic just because I value being a woman and stand on the fact that I am a woman.
It's hard to tell people what they're not.
So speaking of D-list celebrities,
Mhm.
we have Jess Hilarious in the hot seat. And the reason why she's in the hot seat is not for her comedy, that's for damn sure. But it was because she made a comment that only women can have babies. And so this was met with some pushback on the Breakfast Club from their guest, Lene Vanny. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. Is it Vanny? Vanay? I feel like I should do anyways. And she basically, I know, right? She basically said anyone with a uterus can have a baby. And even if they don't identify as a woman, if they have a uterus, they can have a baby, which Jess did agree and said, yes, if you have a uterus, you can have a baby because you're a woman, basically is what she was saying. And so this met with some more pushback from like Laverne Cox and a whole community of saying that she's probably that she was being transphobic in her comment, in her statement. And Jess was standing 10 toes down on this, that yes, you're still a woman if you got a uterus, regardless of what you identify. And so this actually triggered an entire conversation about when does it become about womanhood versus being transphobic. Can you affirm and uplift womanhood without being transphobic? And how far have we gotten where we can just say that, yeah, they had a uterus, so therefore a man had a baby because they identify as a man? I guess that's the way it would be. Was that a trans man? That's a trans man. But anyways, moving on. The whole question I'm asking you guys, because I realized I just befuddled it a little bit, is that what do you think about Jess Hilarious statement about women can have babies because they have a uterus, and that being her superpower, that because she can have a baby, and also the pushback from the LGBTQ community pertaining to her statement?
Man, that's a hot button issue right there. Here's why I think it's so hard to really discuss and really come to some sort of consensus. I think our language, our terminology has been so conflated at this point. I mean, we went from having men and women to then having trans men and then having trans women, then having trans women say, I'm woman just like the regular women. So now the regular women, birth women, need to call themselves cis women because we're all women. And I think what Jess was trying to do was to redraw these lines of distinction and say, okay, I am, she was defining her womanhood by her ability to bring forth kids, or her biological structure being so that she could birth children, having a uterus instead of, let's say, testes and whatever. And the pushback to that was, if I remember correctly, it was like, no, anybody with a uterus can have a baby, even if it's a male. And I think the person was saying that to suggest that if someone was trans male, then they are still have a uterus, and that defeats Jess's superpower. But I think the conversation she was trying to have was, she was trying to make a distinction that says, in order for her identity of womanhood to really resonate with her, she draws strength from the fact that she both has a uterus and presents as a female, and she's saying that makes her a woman. Okay, and that's it's hard to tell people what they're not. Right? It's hard to tell people how that they aren't however they feel, or that they don't feel whatever they feel. The problem then comes is, how do we determine who has the ownership right over these terms? And as these terms are redefined, we try to redefine ourselves, or find new words for ourselves, or find ways to distinguish ourselves from terms that we used to associate with that may no longer clearly define us. I think that's where she was with that. Right. So it's, for instance, I ran into a guy. This is going to sound like a digression, but I don't think it is. I ran into a guy, and he said that he missed the time when Black people were called Negroes. And I was, I'm from Mississippi. I was like, I don't have good feelings about the word Negro and then how it was used and when it was used or whatever. And he said, listen, no, he says, when we were Negroes, we had our businesses, we had Black Wall Street, we had this, we had that. There was a different kind of culture when we were Negroes. And I was like, And then I thought about how Black people are continuously renamed every so often, from Blacks to African Americans to Negroes to whatever. And I thought about it in terms of how, as a person moves in that space, when people put you into some sort of larger group and say, you're monolithic in the sense, or you're one big group, then you do try to find ways then to distinguish yourself. For instance, and I'll say this in our land, I grew up as a Pentecostal, okay, apostolic Pentecostal, Holy Ghost, speaking in tongues, whatever. That's how I grew up. I don't think that a lot of Pentecostals or apostolics would like for me to go around saying I'm Pentecostal or apostolic. They would feel like they need a distinction between me and them because my views or how I express it may be so different that they don't feel we should be sharing the same term. I think that's where she was coming from. And I think until we have the conversation about what we're just going to call people, until women, cis women, I guess, are able to go back to just being called women and feeling like they can stand on that and that is something exclusive that they own, I think this culture clash that we're having will continue. I don't think she tried to hurt anybody. I think she was trying to just stand on her little square, carve out her space, and say why she felt she could still define herself in this way.
I gotta tell you, I am so glad you went first, because you took such a great academic, thoughtful approach to the conversation. Like you did. So it's like, yay.
Thanks.
because like I get to be dumb on this one, right? First of all, I want to say that a womb is a superpower. Y'all should already know how I feel about the fact that, I mean, come on, man, we would not be here without them. I mean, I don't understand how we downplay the blessing, just everything that is. It begins and ends with that for me, and just in terms of like just the miracle of life, the role that women play in that. I mean, it's not a superficial thing. You know what I mean? Like this is something that I don't know, man. Like you're born, your body evolves, you have things happen, you have a window of time, and then it's just like just the grand design of it all. I'm not trying to get religious or anything like that, but to me, it is a miracle. And I think we just take that for granted. Like it's just something like you could just put on. But so to me, when I saw it, I didn't even understand the context. I was like, oh shit, she pregnant again? That's what I thought initially when I first saw it. I was like, damn, girl, weren't you just pregnant? I mean, superpower or. But anyways, so for me, I agree with that. It is a superpower. It is a blessing. But as far as a larger conversation, it's far simpler than that to me, right? I am women, hear me roar. You know what I'm saying? Like, listen, if you've been a woman for all your life, right? And that's all you've known, you know, that this is woman. This is what a woman is, right? And I get that things evolve over time. And then a group comes along and says, hey, I want to co-op. I want to be a part of this thing too, right? So you got to figure out how to make it make sense. So I get that, right? So you have one group that's happy with how things are. Hey, I women hear me roar. And you have another group who wants to change things because they want to exist. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? In principle, but what happens is there becomes infringements that happen in this kind of like pluralistic world that we live in. So the woman is just going about her business like, hey, I'm a woman just doing my thing, right? She's not hurting nobody. There's no intent there, right? But then the other person who's like, hey, cis woman, and the other woman's like, well, why are you calling me that? You know what I'm saying? And that woman is like, what the fuck is that? And immediately she feels some type of way. I understand why she'd feel some type of way. Like, why does her worldview have to change? Even though she didn't, right? I do get that we have to figure out how we make space for each other. And so maybe that's where the crux of the conversation is, right? Because the irony for me in all this is that people who want tolerance seem to not want to give it sometimes. Like when I hear people have this conversation for real, I hear women say, hey man, I'm a woman. I respect, hey, you want to do your thing, but you ain't this. Right? There's things I have to go through. There's a way that my worldview says that biologically, whatever justifications, right, that this is my position and I'm not going to come up off it just to make you comfortable. right? Because I do think there's a point where you have to stop asking somebody to discomfort themselves for someone else's comfort. I think that's a real conversation that we got to be able to have for real, right? Because if I feel like my wife is a woman and I may not identify that a man or a person who was formerly a male or whatever, I can choose to not acknowledge that. But in what practical way does that affect my life for real, right? So most of the time, if I'm being honest, I just am polite. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't really cost me much to pretend live in their world if it somehow provides us some value without taking much from mine. But I'm a man who's saying this, right? Most of the time, we're not really concerned about trans men for real, because there really is no danger to us, unlike how I can see it being different for women, right? When you talk about competing in sports, for example, right? There's some legitimate concerns that I think women can have in this conversation or people can have without it being transphobic. And that's really the point I really wanted to make at the end of all this. Like, it becomes hard to have this conversation that just because somebody has a difference of opinion, you want to throw a phobia on somebody. No, motherfuckers ain't scared of that shit. Sorry. But a person may feel like, hey, man, I don't want to live in y'all fucking world that doesn't make them transphobic. Right? Y'all gotta look up words, yo. Phobia has a fear on the back end. Now, if somehow people were fearful that women are going to be replaced by by trans women, okay, I can see your point, but that's not what's happening. You know what I'm saying? Because I think most women are pretty confident in their superpower, you know, even if they're not using it or choosing not to. So I think we got to be honest. Like, the real conversation is how much each side wants to give to each other to allow them to live their reality. One side already has history behind them in regards to their version of reality, right? And the other side want us to participate so that they could be more comfortable living theirs. I'm okay with meeting y'all some of the way, but it damn sure ain't gonna be halfway. Let's be clear. The numbers don't add up. The journey ain't the same. So I just feel like people just might have to take what they can get. You know what I'm saying? And we got to negotiate piece by piece. It ain't all gonna be. Oh, and one last thing I want to say too, right? Because I heard the speech that the brother gave, and he low-key was calling old girl manly. Like, I forgot the brother's name because he got mad that Jessica said what she said, and he was making a diatribe about how it could affect her because some woman got killed by a man who thought she was a trans woman, but she wasn't. She was really a woman who looked like a man. And then homeboy said, Jessica, he basically, and I said, oh my God, the level of shade. Good sir, okay? What Jessica did would not make us transphobic. But what you did might, though, for real. You was doing way too much, my guy, to try to make a fucking point. And that be the problem. Y'all don't have one. Y'all be bending over backwards. Can I say that? Yeah.
We said a lot of things on this, so, I don't see why not.
I'm
So,
sorry.
Yeah, that's not the worst thing you said. You're
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so
Go ahead, Esther. Save me for myself.
So, I'm gonna say that I personally, I stand with Jess on this. You know why? Because I'm tired of the being considered transphobic and, just because I value being a woman and stand on the fact that I am a woman. I don't need the word cis in front of it. You know why I don't need the word cis in front of it? Because I'm already a woman biologically. And for those who are not or who are biologically women who want to be trans men and still have birth, hey, that's your prerogative. And you can call yourself a man. But when we get down to the rooty tooty of the goodies, you got a vajayjay. That's how you're able to have that baby. And biologically in the world, as in human nature, as a matter of fact, just nature in general, there's male and there's female. And one side can have baby, one side cannot, regardless of if you present yourself a certain way. And so you can present yourself as a male all day, but as long as you have the innards of a biological woman, then technically, yes, you are a woman having a baby, regardless of how your face looks. Now, I will call you what you want to call by your preferred pronoun, and I will identify you as the man that you want to be identified as, but your function, unless you take all that out and replace it with the built-in penis, according to surgery, apparently they take your uterus, invert it, sew it up and all that good stuff, something like that. Unless you have these surgeries and you no longer can have a baby, guess what? You're still a woman because you had all the function in the first place. I'm going to get a lot of hate on this, and I'm really not trying to be transphobic in any shape, way, or form, but I am so tired of being told that I'm the problem and people like Jess is the problem because we identify womanhood differently than the trans community. And this is no shade against the trans community in any shape, way, or form. So my thing is, you want us to be tolerant and say, hey, we only want equality. We only want inclusiveness. But then you fail to include us because you want to add extra stuff to us so that now we all got something in front of it. So you can't just say I'm a trans woman because, or a trans man. So now we got to be cis women because you can't just own up to being trans in front of it because ultimately it's like, well, but I'm a woman. That's what I identify with. Well, you know what? That's fine. You can identify as a woman, but you still have a uterus. And, or if you don't have a uterus because you're actually a man who's cosplaying as a woman, then that's fine too. This is your prerogative. And stop trying to ask me and people like me to say, oh, you are a woman because you identify as woman. Hey, I respect your pronouns all day. I will stand with you. I will say equality, equality all day. But at the same time, I need you to respect my boundaries too. And if I want to be called a woman without having cis in front of it or any of that stuff, then you should be okay with just calling a woman because that's what I identify as. So I stand with Jess on this. She went a little far on one of her videos that apparently was deleted because she viewed it as a delusion and and said that the only difference between a trans person, I'm glad she deleted, even though I'm throwing it back out there, the difference between a trans person and a mental insane person was a straitjacket. Now she went too far there, and I appreciate the fact that she deleted the video because I disagree with that concept. I disagree with what she was saying, but I understood where she was coming from because you know what? Before women can wear pants, if a woman was wearing pants, she was considered crazy. When a woman was hysterical, guess where she went? She went to the nutty bin because they were like, oh, she's nutty. So craziness is defined differently through each generation, right? And at some point, being LGBTQ was actually considered what's the word? I don't want to say crazy, but was considered you had a mental illness at some point, right? So now it's been normalized. So I disagree with her because I think in that regards, because what you identify as, it could be because that's the way you were born. It could be through nature, it could be through nurture, or whatever the case may be, maybe through attraction. I don't know. So I don't believe it's a mental illness, but I do believe the fact that you keep trying to force me to say I'm cis may be a mental illness because why the hell I have to say I'm a cis woman versus just a woman? So I'm
Yeah,
going to
sorry.
say, I accept you for who you are. Just don't force it on me. And I also accept you if you want to be a woman, but then you give birth, or you want to be a man and you have a uterus and you give birth, then I'm going to say, congratulations, Ma, because you gave birth. And then afterwards, I'm going to say, all right, okay, Pops, because Brittany, wasn't it Brittany, what, Renner? No, not Renner.
Reiner?
Yeah, that's it, and now she having daddy issues where she's put on child support for the baby that's not even hers. So you want all that drama? I support you with that drama. So just don't infringe on my rights to call me what I want to call myself, just like I won't infringe on your rights to call you what you want to call yourself.
Jay, like you want to get in there.
No,
Say something.
man.
I'm saying, well,
He was like, she gonna get all the
I
smoke
was
now.
Right. You want some of this?
no. Listen. I agree wholeheartedly with S&M. Because again, I think it really just depends on where you land for real, and more in practical application of life. We're not dealing with these things for real, right? So a lot of the times, it just depends on how we choose to address people, what we choose to acknowledge, and most people are decent. You know what I mean? But I will say this though, and I got to say it. I'm trying to find the best way to say this. I can understand how some people may question the mental capacity of someone to believe they are something they have never had the experience of, especially if you try to quantify what that thing is externally. I'm gonna just leave it there. Because I've just never wondered, like a person who's never been a thing, how would you know what that thing feels like or is like if you've never? That's a riddle that I find myself still trying to answer. You get what I'm saying? I get that because the way my brain works, it's almost like Rachel Dolezal a little bit, right? It's like you think you know what this experience is, but how? And then if the only thing that you can do is approximate it through how you show up in the world, we'll call it cosplaying, but we don't like that when it's transracial. But anywho, so I just got questions in terms of how people who are not a thing can think they are a thing they've never been, and what basis are they basing that feeling off of? That's the thing I'm trying to. Maybe it's a question for another day. Maybe we'll have somebody who could tap into the show and provide that answer for us. But it is. But to your point, S&M, there was a period of time, and it wasn't that far off, where certain things were classified in a certain type of way when it came to mental health. And so, yes, things are being normalized. We're gonna give thoughts and prayers to everybody. Look, we all want everybody to be happy, live their best lives.